Okay, to call our meeting to order. First, we're going to have, we'll turn the time over to Councilmember Hanson for our opening.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this opportunity we have to be at this meeting tonight. We're thankful for this good country we live in and this good city that we live in. We ask you to please bless us that we can make good decisions, that we can have listening ears and have good discernment as we meet tonight. We're thankful for those that support us in these positions, and we're thankful for good families and good friends. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Please stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. First, we will have a presentation from Michael Romero. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for letting me come talk to you this evening. I'm here to give you an update on the US 89 State Environmental Study. Next slide. So just as a brief reminder, the study area encompasses US 89 from Farmington up through I-84 in Uinta-South Weber area. The purpose and need for the project is to improve regional and local mobility, address current and future travel demands on US 89, provide enhanced system linkage, as well as improve safety along the corridor. Up to this point in time, we've had 4 public meetings. We had a scoping open house held last February. We had a concept open house where we threw out a whole bunch of different ideas in June of last year. And then in this last September, we had a public hearing, and we had some alterations to that plan based on that. And so we had another formal public hearing this last Tuesday at Davis High School. The preferred alternative that we have shown in that state environmental study, the draft, is a 6-lane freeway from Farmington up through I-84. It includes 4 new interchanges, one at the 200-400 north border here in Fruit Heights or in Kaysville, depending on which side of the street you're on. There's a new interchange at Oak Hills Drive, a new interchange at the Gordon Avenue extension, as well as a new interchange at Antelope Drive. And it also does include grade-separated crossings or bridges at Nichols Road in Fruit Heights and at Crestwood Road in Kaysville. Some of the revisions that we had from the draft study that was released in September to this latest study that was released is we went in and we modified the connection between Valley View Drive and SR 193. We allow for northbound or access from Valley View Drive to the northbound on-ramp at SR 193. And then also we modified the Gordon Avenue connection to be a little bit more consistent with Kaysville or Layton City's master plan. And the next couple of slides show that. And so this shows a modified Gordon connection, and what we ended up doing is shifting it out to the west to change the tie-in point where it actually aligns with Gentile Street in Layton. And this is the Valley View connection that shows the access from Valley View Drive to the northbound off-ramp at SR 193. And so the schedule as we sit today, we have a public comment period that's currently going on. That started that started January 2nd, and that extends up and through February 3rd. And we do encourage people to look at the study if they have questions, ask questions, submit comments. And that we did have our public hearing in the 16th of January. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the comment period is closing in just over 2 weeks. And we are looking to have this document finalized in March of this year. We do encourage the cities and the residents to stay involved. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I've talked a little bit with Andy in the past related to the study. We have some coordination as we work forward related to the water tank up on the east side we've got to work with. But I would encourage you just to stay involved. If you have any questions, please let me know. My contact information for the website is up there, as well as a hotline and the project email address.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Do we have any questions from council?
No,
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Larry.
Councilmember Page.
Yeah, hey, I just want to say I really appreciate the effort you guys have gone through with all these open houses, and I've been to every one of them, and I think we've had some great turnouts.
Yes, we have.
And I know that I live up by Crestwood and in that area, and there's been a lot of concern and everything. But I think that the general feeling is that you guys have been willing to listen to them, and I think the majority of them are very happy with the way it's turned out. And I just I don't think you guys ever get very much thanks, and you think everybody just complains and there's nothing you can do right. But I just want you to know that I think that the people of, at least in my area, have been impressed what you've tried to do and listen to them and take into account their observations, and so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barber.
I just have a couple questions. When you looked on the slides that you had, you talked about the Gordon Lane interchange, and you talked about how it was necessary because as it correlates with Layton City's master plan.
Yes.
And I was unable to find Layton City's plan. Can you talk to me about how that coordinates?
Layton City's master plan is a little bit difficult to find. It takes quite a few Google searches.
I would agree with that.
So you're not the only one that's had a hard time. Originally, in the first version of the document that we released, the connection that you can see kind of going towards the left-hand side, I'll walk over there.
There's a laser there on the podium.
Oh, perfect. So this connection right here was actually up in here and impacted some homes and took out some properties. And so Layton City's master plan had it coming down here and tying in to this intersection. So we realigned that to be consistent with what they had shown.
Interesting. Thank you. And as far as improvements to the freeway itself, things like I'm really impressed by like Councilmember Page said, the improvements that we've had for the less noise used on the road itself and different things, the skylighting. I think these are great things. I really applaud the citizens who have advocated for them. How about how can we best work with you on the enhanced landscape and things that we're looking for this? That's
one of the things that we've committed to doing as we move forward is forming some sort of community council working group to interact with. The exact details of how we're going to do that, we still have to figure that out and still have to determine it. But we do plan on working with residents from Fruit Heights through Kaysville, Layton, South Weber as well. We still have to work out the details, but kind of envision a working group that we can work with, and obviously be working with the cities themselves.
Do you know do we have funds set aside for the beautification and things like that?
Typically on the UDOT project, it's 3/4 of 1%. The total project budget is allocated for beautification, landscaping, those types of things. And so we try to work with the cities to see what they would like to see incorporated, as well as residents along the corridor.
So as the working group works on it and we determine we're going to need more than that initial investment, is it to lobby with the legislators or is it to work with you guys to get actual more money to it? There's
a couple different options. Sometimes, like Layton City has been good with providing funds for enhanced landscaping. They actually came up with additional money for beautification at interchanges and some things like that. So there's a couple different avenues as to ways to raise that money.
Will Layton City give us some of that money?
I don't know if they'll give you the money.
Okay, I would strongly advocate for residents to continue to be involved, especially to lobby at the legislative level to get more money funded, especially initially, because this will be an ongoing project and it'll be so much harder to get later on. So you can count on me to keep working on this.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate that.
Thank you for your time and let me come join you this evening.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, Cole Stevens is going to give us a presentation.
Cole Stevens, Kaysville Parks and Recreation. We've been asked to give our department report for basically a year in review of 2017. Just some of the highlights of our department. It's a little bit more than just parks. It's recreation, cemetery, community events, facilities, as well as our urban forest. Go to the next slide. So I'm just going to briefly highlight each component of our department in a brief review. Happy to answer any questions that come up. Let's see if this pulls up here. But while we're waiting for that slide to pull up, we'll just give you a little bit of background as far as our department, as far as staffing goes. We have 8 full-time employees, 2 permanent part-time employees, and then we employ hundreds of seasonal employees, whether that's soccer referees, baseball referees, landscape maintenance crews, cemeteries crews. But I kind of want to start with our Kaysville City Cemetery, just a little bit of history about the cemetery and kind of where it's going. It's 22 and a half acres in size. It was established in 1865. And just in case you're interested, the oldest war veteran we have buried in the cemetery dates to the War of 1812. So just some unique facts about our cemetery. With the cemetery, we kind of track a history so that we can kind of project the needs that the cemetery has. And just those first bullet points are kind of our 4.5-year interment history. Shows you our FY 14, 15, 16, and 17. We are trending upwards as far as the number of burials that we are doing per year. Year to date in FY 18, we've had 76, which is on par to surpass our totals for FY 17. Yet here in the cemetery, that's something we can't really project as far as our numbers. That's, of course, you know that's subject to a lot of different variables. But we average, just based on our yearly totals, we average about 2 3/4 burials per week, which takes about 8 hours through the whole process with that burial. And just to give you an example of how our burials fluctuate from week to week, the week of January 6th to January 13, which is a 1-week period, we had 12 in that week. So when that comes, it kind of dominates everything within the parks side of the department. And we have 5 old sections of the cemetery, and then we have, of course, the new sections that were opened in 2012. Just something you might be interested in based on the available plots we have as of today. They're available in plats G, H, and I. Based on our current pace, we anticipate that all those plots will be sold out in just a little over 20 years. That doesn't mean they'll all be occupied, but that means we'll have no more spaces to sell for burials. Next slide. Then jumping onto our parks. Here, just kind of an image of our East Mountain Wilderness Park, kind of the one unknown gems that I think we have within our park system. We currently, by the end of 2018, we will have 158.29 acres of developed park property. When I say developed park property, that is property that is maintained, that has mowable grasses, flower beds, and other properties, whether it's city block or parks. We have also 202.5 acres of undeveloped property, but a large portion of that is the 140 acres that consists of the East Mountain Wilderness Park that has biking trails, has 5 single-night campsites. We have approximately 10 miles of trails. Just to highlight a couple of those things, we have 10 multi-use soccer fields, so the addition of Pioneer Park is going to help alleviate some strain there. 2 basketball courts, or 2 tennis courts, and then 8, of course, of our brand new pickleball courts out at Barnes Park. Just for some history's sake as well, the oldest park that we have in our park system is Gailey Park, which was completed in 1976. It began construction in the 1960s. That park was donated by Harold and Louise Gailey. A couple interesting facts, too. We also partner very heavily with Davis High School as far as use of some of our park open space for their soccer program and some of their softball programs using our batting cages of the recreation center. For those that are like numbers, just to give you a little bit of perspective, when you compare our parks to your home yards, we operate approximately 351 irrigation valves. and we have about 4,500 sprinkler heads that need to be maintained on a daily basis throughout the maintenance season. We also have 11 playgrounds that we inspect monthly by an in-house, one of our parks employees is a certified playground safety inspector. Next, we'll move on to our recreation. Oh, here's a little video. So let me get the ability to play this on the corner. Is the play not going to show? Okay, we'll skip and we won't worry about this little video, but this little video just kind of showed a highlight. This past year we were able to host a 12U, 10U Western National softball tournament out of Barnes Park, and this was just kind of a little clip that kind of went through that. But
it started on mine.
It started now. So.
Share with the class.
Or is that Mayor
I
Witt's?
can't make it stop.
So you can get yours to play. We can't get this one to
Mine
play.
works.
That's all right.
It's great.
Okay. We'll just move. We'll skip to our recreation. So our recreation program is very robust. This is just an image of Barnes Park, one of the football fields that we have. So our programs offered in 2017 encompass ages from 3 to adults, senior citizens. We offer 18 youth and athletic programs. Our largest program, just by sheer number, is soccer with over 2,300 participants. And we offer 8 adult classes and programs. Our largest program there is our adult softball program with 864. We offer 4 art and music programs, 5 science and education programs. We serve over 9,500 participants in all programs, whether that's a sport, an art, music, whatever it might be. Our recreation staff, they schedule over 6,500 games per year. Another unique fact with our recreation is just the amount of youth that we employ, predominantly Kaysville citizens, young people in the community, about 150 of our youth staff that act as scorekeepers, referees, site supervisors. One of the things in our recreation program to help, as we've been going along with our success framework, is doing more satisfaction surveys at the end of our programs. The one we did, our last program that we did, was the end of our football season, asking questions on how they liked their participants, what could we do better, how do they like their coaches, what are things that we can improve on. They came back very favorable as far as the program goes, but of course there's always things that we can work on. The next one that we will do in that will be with our junior jazz basketball program that ends here in a couple months. Just to kind of bullet point some of the community events that we participate in, whether the city directly oversees them or we partner with community groups. They're all listed there. Our biggest one that I think that Kaysville has that we put a lot of effort into is our July 4th celebration that brings in anywhere between, for the parade, anywhere between 30 and 35,000 people. And then with the fireworks show at night, anywhere between 20 and 25,000 people participate in that. So it's a great highlight and celebration for Kaysville. Just a little bit of fact about our urban forest. Angel Street Soccer Complex, many might know, but it's also what we designate as our city arboretum. We've been 19 years consecutively as a Tree City USA. In 2017, we planted 78 trees on park and public properties. We have over 2,042 trees that are maintained by our park staff on those parks and public properties. And you all just saw our Christmas lights. They're currently being taken down, but this past year, the parks guys, mainly led by Sean Sackett, installed 2,300 strands of lights on all those trees throughout City Hall blocks. So just to give you a little bit of number about how many light strands it takes to light those trees. That's right. And then our facilities also is something that falls under our department. This is just to give you a brief overview of all the facilities that the city has. We have the old library building, our recreation offices center, municipal center, operations center, fire station, and of course the police station. Of course, with every facility there's challenges, aging HVAC systems, roof issues as far as age, leaks, all those kind of things that you would expect. Departmental needs as far as space, where to move offices, and then just, of course, the asphalt maintenance with the parking lots. One thing I want to highlight, because I think it's very important for our community and something that we're very grateful for in our Parks and Recreation program, is our volunteers. We couldn't do what we do, whether it's running our recreation programs, our volunteers as far as our community events. But we estimate with our recreation program coaches and volunteers, they log about 30,800 hours of volunteer service. Our community event volunteers between across the board is about 8,500. And then we also do quite a few Eagle Scout and community service projects at 5,100 hours. And when you pull all those together and give you a dollar value to those based on a 2015 estimate, that's over $1 million worth of volunteer hours on a dollar amount that are contributed to the city. Just to highlight our 2018 major projects, Pioneer Park is under construction. With this abnormally warm winter, they've been able to continue to work out there, pouring a lot of the sidewalk, which we didn't think would be able to be done this early. And then as far as addressing some of the needs with the old library building, and that's still undetermined as far as what that will actually be, but the council will get to kind of guide and direct us on what that will ultimately be. So that's kind of the highlight, not a highlight, but just a big broad view of our department and the things that we do. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Cole. Questions? You did that well.
All right.
That there's no questions. Well done. Thank you,
That was very
Cole.
good.
We appreciate you. All right. Okay. Now we're going to move on to our consent agenda. Would anybody like to move the consent agenda?
I need to, can I say something about
Councilmember Hanson, yes.
Just in reviewing the last city council meeting notes, the substation tag, we just need to change that. It says that we made a motion to approve the position and job description, and we voted in favor. I think the whole vote was just to move it to this meeting.
Okay. All right. So let's do this. How about say I'd like to remove 3B from the consent agenda.
Okay, I'd like to move. I make a motion. Do you motion
Or-
this?
or
No,
just say
I'd like
I
to
wanna-
move 3B from the consent agenda.
Perfect. And then why don't you move the rest of the consent agenda and we'll vote on that.
And then I make a motion that we vote on the rest of the consent agenda.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going backwards. Go ahead,
Oh.
Dave.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay, let's talk about 3B. I think you've indicated your concerns about it. How would we fix it? So, help me out.
You're going to defer to me, thanks. I think if that's the only change,
Yeah.
if Councilman Hanson or anybody else wants just to make a motion accepting those minutes with that particular change, I think that would do it.
Okay. All right. Anybody want to make that motion?
Can I ask a question? Process question?
Is it? Let's move this, and then we'll go back.
Tell
to
me
the
what we're
question.
moving.
3B
So we are
minutes.
taking those out of the consent
Yeah,
agenda.
so
Then
we-
we'll address the rest of them. Right.
So with consent agenda, we just move them as a block. We don't do them one by one.
Okay.
Okay. We just
And if we
move them
want
as
it
a
one by
block.
one, we
That you have to
remove
pull it
it.
out. Yeah. So this is new for us. We
So-
don't generally do consent.
Procedurally, what just happened is Councilmember Hanson moved 3B off the consent agenda, and then the rest of the consent agenda was approved by vote.
Right.
And then we'll discuss 3B and hear a motion on that.
Okay.
Mayor,
Sir.
I misunderstood that. I apologize.
Okay.
3C.
Would you like?
I would like to discuss.
How do we undo this? Since we already moved it.
And
And
given we
voted.
haven't been voting.
I think
Yeah.
it's still appropriate. If Councilmember Adams wants to make
Sure.
a motion to readdress 3C separately,
Okay.
I think that's
All
totally
right.
fine.
So let's deal with 3B first, and then we'll do 3C. Okay? All right.
So I just make a motion with 3B that we accept the minutes with that one change.
Any second?
Second.
Okay. Let's
Could
vote.
you restate the motion?
Oh, yeah, sure. The motion is just to accept the minutes with that change that I described. And the change is that we didn't vote on that last council meeting. We just pushed it to this one.
Okay. So do you want to go ahead and start the vote?
Yes. Aye.
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 All right. Councilmember Adams?
Is there a format I need to follow here, or can I just ask some questions, or what would you prefer, Mayor?
Do we have to
Why
remove
don't-
it? Wait, do we have to remove that item first?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay. Then I move that we remove 3C also from the consent agenda.
And that's already been done. If you just have a question on it, that's all you have to do is say, I'd like to take 3C off the consent agenda, and it there doesn't have to be a second, there doesn't have to be a vote, it just comes off the consent agenda.
Okay, so again, I move that we take 3C off the consent agenda.
Okay. And would you like to address that?
Yes, if I may. So in the packet, we show one bidder. Is there more than one bidder on this project?
Yes, sir. There was about a dozen.
A dozen bidders?
You should have received the bid summary probably today.
Why did it come today? Why wasn't it in by the agenda deadline?
The bid was on.
That was not there yesterday. So why didn't it come by the agenda deadline?
The bid was on Thursday. We got the bid summary on Monday morning. It was available by Monday. I'm not sure what other technical issues may have occurred.
Yeah, today's Thursday. It wasn't in the packet. So it was put in the packet today. I did not check the packet this afternoon, to be honest. So was it just installed into it today?
No, it wasn't. And truly, I don't know if that was Monday or Tuesday. It was established pretty early. That went to Dropbox. It would go to Dropbox first.
Okay. Is this the same water line project, then, that we put out last year?
It's not exactly the same. There's one street that was added to this project this year, Borough Street, to go along with Market Street.
Oh, we added an entire street
We added
compared to
that
the 20, because the title of this project, right, came before us last July.
Yes, it was advertised actually before the end of the year. So previously it was advertised in about June or July. That's correct.
Cool. Do we have a regulation on that, Mayor, as far as stuff being added to the packet after the fact, or what is your regulation there? I appreciated early on you mentioned that one of your goals was to ensure that there was actually above and beyond the amount of material that we needed, and at the time of the agenda deadline. So obviously I'm caught off guard here, and I'm not looking to point a finger at all at anyone. It wasn't in the packet.
You know what? I will do a better job checking. So I apologize for that, and we'll do a better job. All right?
So going forward, are we to expect that the packet is changeable, or after the deadline it's...
I want every piece of information that needs to go to council is going to be in the packet when it goes out.
Initially?
Yes. Yep. That is our standard.
Okay. Cool.
All
Yeah,
right?
that would certainly be helpful.
Absolutely.
Rather, day of is a bit hard to absorb, so...
That is our standard. All right. So any other questions? Are you comfortable?
Was it published in a newspaper, the advertisement?
No, it was on BidSync. It was on our webpage. I believe it was in the newspaper as well, per the ordinance.
So I'm not getting a very affirmative answer on the newspaper, we believe, or it was, or
I don't know that for sure.
Okay. Is there anyone in the room that could help answer that question? We've got some staff heads here. The reason I ask is that in the procurement policy, we have an additional requirement, which is a state requirement, that in our rules, we do require, and it was on the website, and it was on BidSync. So great job on that. But when it goes over, the state code section referenced is 1139-101. And under bid limit, it is defined that anything over $125,000, granted this state law was enacted in 2003, and they give you a 3% gainer every year on that. But this project is $550,000, so we're well above that. In that state law, it actually says that you must circulate it twice in a newspaper, no less than 5 days before the award of the bid. So that's where I'd like to maybe catch a blind spot of ours. It says if the project is estimated to go above that 125K mark, it must be put in the papers. And that's above and beyond us. That's state law. And I would definitely defer to Nick if he feels differently. But that is in our procurement policy to follow that guideline. And I'm only one on the body up here, but I have a little bit of concern that we're not adhering to that. And I'm definitely open to correction if it was put in a newspaper.
Yeah, the consulting engineer that designed the project also was responsible for the advertising. That's why I'm not positive that was done. We've done it consistently in the past, but I couldn't verify that it was done on this specific project.
Okay. And then are we doubling up on asphalt work? I like in the packet how it says that a lot of these roads are slated to be completely redone this year. So we're not wasting money on paving those trenches. So wherever we can, are we?
Yes, sir.
We're saving. Okay, so we're not, all right, not doubling down and paying twice for it.
That's the intent, yes.
Josh, did you have something to say?
The word from the consulting engineers was that this was advertised in the Clipper.
Okay.
I don't know
Very well.
when, etc.
Could we get the reference for that provided to us? That was searched and just wasn't there as all. So if that is okay, Mayor? The reference?
I'm sure that it can be sent to us. Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Josh. Councilmember Garn. There you are.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wondering on that. It seems like an awfully archaic and outmoded code section. I know it's probably the legislature or state law, but who really looks at the newspaper anymore? So, maybe we send a note to our representatives to get that changed so we don't even have to worry about posting in the newspaper that no one looks at. But anyway.
All right. Thank you. All right. So I will entertain a motion to move this project.
Now, just a point of order, I guess, or I don't know if that's the appropriate thing to say, but it seems like we already passed the consent agenda, and this was just a question. So do we really need to vote on this item again?
Yeah, because we pulled it off the consent agenda. So it was, once you pull it off the consent agenda, then it's no longer part of that motion that passed. It now requires its own separate motion.
Hanson's concern. So.
Okay, so then I move to award the bid for the waterline project as described to Craig F. Sorensen Construction, Inc.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. Councilmember Garn?
Aye.
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 I'd like to review the updated docs. It's an A.
Okay. Aye. Thank you. All right. As you can see, we're learning how to use consent agenda. Thank you for all playing along. All right. All right. Any conflicts of interest with any items this evening? All right. Seeing none. All right. We're going to move into our action items. Now, I want to describe when we're doing action items, what we're going to do is staff will introduce the item, and then what we'll do is we had sign-up sheets, and if you have comments, before our council deliberates, we will have a public comment period, and then we'll close the public comment period, and then they will discuss. So there is built-in time for you to make your comments. All right? So let's go with Item A, agreement for the annexation and development of land between Kaysville City and Frost Family Real Estate, LLC, at approximately 1402 North Highway 89. All right, and Andy is presenting this.
We've had a petition to annex a significant portion of property east of Highway 89. As shown on the map there, you can see the pink highlighted area up in the top corner. Zoom in on it. That area has gone through some process to this point. We added it to our annexation policy plan. Planning Commission, the City Council has held a public hearing. There are some concerns with this property. If you look real close, you see a little brown circle right here. That is our highest water tank. Follow the contour across. There's property in this annexation area above the elevation of that water tank, which means we cannot serve water under the normal procedure because we use gravity to create the pressure. So there's a portion of the property that cannot be served by our existing water system. Also, currently this property and any development that's currently on it, 2 or 3 or 4 houses, are being served by Rocky Mountain Power. Our policy over the years has been that if you're in Kaysville, you're on Kaysville City Power. We've worked with Rocky Mountain Power and discussed it with them. They've given us a price to buy them out and turn that area over to us, by their facility and their customers. So they've given us that number. Because of these complications, there's a couple other items as well. The pressure irrigation, you see the reservoir here. That's the current pressure irrigation reservoir. Again, it doesn't have enough elevation to adequately serve or to even serve at all some of the property. Our ordinance does specifically exempt property east of Highway 89 from having the requirement to have pressure irrigation. However, from the water department, they're concerned with some of the state rules. If you don't have secondary water, you have a backflow preventer on every sprinkler system, which by state law is required to be inspected on a regular basis. So they're not anxious to serve up to 150 new backflow preventers. It doesn't have to be necessarily every year, but on a very regular basis. So due to that, we have proposed that we consider annexation of this property under an annexation agreement. You received the first draft of that agreement in the packet, I believe. It outlines several issues, including those things. We're actually still in some negotiation with the developer on those items. Just quickly what the items that are key are. They've requested the R18 zoning. There's been little to no discussion about what the zoning should be on this property. The agreement says that's what they'll receive if we agree to it. I think it would be wise to have some opportunity to discuss the zoning and assure that that's an appropriate zone there. There's the issues on the water tank. What we've proposed that they pay for the amount of water tank and facilities appurtenant to that would be needed to serve the area to be annexed. Based on the studies and the engineering we've done, it would be about a 100,000 gallon tank. 100,000 is not the most efficient size of tank to build. And if we were going to build one, we'd probably upsize that to a larger size, but we feel that they should be responsible for that initial $100,000 worth of cost. They'd like to propose maybe some sort of different cost-sharing scenario than that. In their revised response to the draft agreement, they proposed $100,000. Staff isn't 100% comfortable with that, so we'd throw that out as an item that needs to be reviewed. Secondary water, as I discussed, we proposed that they be required to provide secondary water to the entire property to avoid the conflict I mentioned. They have suggested that they provide secondary water to to as high as elevation as possible and be allowed to not have secondary water above that. So there's some negotiation still to be done there. They've also asked for some ability to have payback on both the power and the water systems. The developer that's doing the project immediately has control of the north, larger piece of property. There are other owners with development potential to the south of that. They would like anything that they do that benefits that property to potentially be paid back from that property when it's developed, and possibly some of the initial cost be deferred and assigned to the homes as they move into the area. So with those 4 items, and there's other minor things, but we think staff can negotiate through those. Those are the items they asked to be changed in the agreement that you've read. With that, we would suggest that this item be tabled to let the staff continue to negotiate, possibly with a little bit of guidance from the council on those specific items and how you'd like us to proceed with that. Also, the developer's here. He would probably like to know what he could look towards as well.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is it appropriate for me to give time to the developer? Yes. Would you like to speak?
Matt Yates, representative developer of this property. So a few things we wanted just to address that is I think that on the water tank that's needed earlier today we heard from Mike Romero that UDOT has a tank that's going to need to be relocated, and so our understanding is the current needs of the city is 10 million gallons to serve the needs of Kaysville City of storage. Currently have 8.5 million gallons, and thus the need of additional storage. And so building it in a location that at the proposed elevation that we have identified is not only a benefit to our project, but also we feel it's a benefit to the city in the sense that it would help with pressure, higher elevation, more pressure, and also the cost is covered of this tank, the relocation of the cost is covered by UDOT. And so our contribution toward it is a very positive thing for the city. I think the city will greatly benefit with our contribution toward the tank. And, you know, there might be a few details we need to work out on when we actually design it, but I think for the most part we have an agreement on that, other than they may choose to upsize it and go after some more storage. With the power, we had agreed to cover the cost of the buyout for Rocky Mountain Power, as well as the cost to extend the lines to the project. And I think that's also a great benefit for the city. It doesn't cost them. The city comes out on the positive end of this with power and water. As far as the secondary water is concerned, the reason we've requested that is because what's entailed in getting secondary water up to the highest elevation of that is just very costly, and it's a maintenance thing too with needing to pump it. And so we feel like that would be fair to let's service. I think we can do the majority of the property with gravity right now, as we've looked at it and had our water engineers study that. And so we feel like that's a good compromise, is to, you know, having a few lots at the top, not have to have the secondary water, and it'll be a much less of a burden on the city to have to inspect much less backflow issues. So overall, we're excited about this project. We think it'll be a really positive thing for the city, and just wonder if you have any questions for us.
Okay. All right. Thank you. What we'll do now is we're going to have a public comment on this item. So I will open the public comment. If anybody would like to comment on this item, you have 3 minutes. I don't have anybody signed up, but if you feel. Would you?
My name is Gregory Frank. I have a question. You're not voting tonight on this, is that correct?
Yes, we are.
You're voting to annex it.
Yes.
And what's the cost to the city?
It's not a question and answer time. Sorry.
You know, that would be good to discuss for the public. I don't think you should be voting on this tonight without giving us the information about what that cost us and what we really gain from this annexation. I don't see any benefit here, okay? So please give that consideration. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Franks. Okay, would anybody else like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comment period. All right. Andy, would you like to address the question that was brought up?
Yes, ma'am. The intent of this agreement is to keep the cost to the city at zero for this annexation, which is what we try to do with all development. They should essentially pay their own way. So the anticipated cost would be a break-even point for the city at no cost.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions from council? Councilmember Adams.
Just questions of, what's fair. We're picking up 90-ish lots, so, we'd be picking up 90 customers or so of all of our services. And so to ask a developer to pay Rocky Mountain Power $6,000 per home times 6 homes is what I've been told, $36,000 that they have to pay Rocky Mountain Power to buy those customers out. I do have some questions that center around fairness. If we are acquiescing those customers into our power company, and it'll be our infrastructure, it'll be our customer, why would we require a developer put that burden on their back? I think there's a little bit of awkwardness to that personally, and I'm surprised to see that it takes $6,000. That's what Rocky Mountain Power charges per household if you want to take them away and put them into another grid. And if you times that by the amount of homes in Kaysville, if that gives us any idea what our power company is worth, that's maybe a little bit of food for thought. Couple other things, the water, if we don't have a code or policy or ordinance that restricts secondary water.
Questions.
Okay, fair
Raise
enough.
it as a question.
Okay, so in a question format of that, if we don't have a restriction on secondary water east of 89, how can we impose that they have secondary water? Shouldn't we, I guess this is a question for Nick, shouldn't we, isn't the cart before the horse, shouldn't we be needing to make a policy then around that before we arbitrarily impose that on one person?
So the code doesn't require that for existing Kaysville City property, but because we're annexing the property, we can require, we have a lot of discretion to require whatever we desire.
Feels a little bit arbitrary. But
It is very much so at the annexation period. It's arbitrary, and the city can set the terms that it wants before it annexes property in. It's
Sure.
very arbitrary.
Totally understand that. The water tank, I've heard, I guess this is back to Andy. So the water tank is the Mutton Hollow Improvement District. Are they interested in partnering in on the new water tank?
Mutton Hollow Water District has expressed some interest in that, yes.
And they're offering a financial offering to do it, or I'm hearing this, but I'd like it confirmed. And
Potentially a financial contribution in exchange for use of that new water tank.
Okay. All right, that's all. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? No, I'm sorry.
I have a question, Mayor.
Councilmember Barber?
On the water tank, because we saw the previous discussion from the U89 from staff, what would happen had we not had this development come in at kind of the same time that this water tank would be already relocated? would there be a cost to the city at all, or would UDOT be replacing the water tank exactly the same as we have it?
We don't know that for sure. We haven't negotiated with UDOT on that water tank. Likely what would happen is they would offer us some cash amount, and we would put that towards a replacement tank. We may upsize that tank in the process, which would be on us.
Okay. Do we have an idea where we would put it with this development not in mind?
With this development, we've looked and identified 2 or 3 locations that we think could work. We haven't done any research to verify that. Just with the Highway 89 tank, the city's anticipated for some time a water tank on the corner of Highway 89 and Green Road. We own that property. We've owned it for a long time. There's pipes run into and out of that property. All other things being equal, that's normally where we'd place the next water tank.
And one last question. Can you restate your recommendation, the staff's recommendation on this item?
At this point, if the developer's not willing to accept the agreement that you have in your hand, that we table this item and continue the negotiation until we come up with an agreement that both parties are willing to accept.
Okay. All right.
Could I ask a clarifier on the tank?
Let me make sure if anybody else has any questions first.
Yeah,
Councilmember Page.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, I have a question. This might be better answered by the people trying to do it. When you talked about secondary water, have your water people said, you talked about if we get the water to them, we'll do that, but you want to be exempt from, the really high expense secondary water on some of your property, and I'm assuming it's the higher lots. Do we know how many that would affect, or what percentage would have secondary water and what percentage would not? Do we know?
Please come forward.
So we have looked at that, and we've had our engineer kind of identify the elevations, and we've tried to look at the units, and it's roughly, it's just the upper about third, probably not quite third, I would say, in the neighborhood of maybe 15 to 20 lots at the very most that we'd be currently, the homes that are those 2 lots in the middle, they have secondary where they're at. So that's our feeling, is if we can get away from doing the booster pump, it's an ongoing expense because of the power needed to run that and the maintenance. Mm-hmm. So it seems like it's a better option to let's inspect the backflow rather than pay power and maintain the pumps. So the other thing we would ask for is we would ask for or hope for a motion that would approve the annexation tonight, subject to us finalizing this agreement. I think we feel like we're really close on most of the issues, and maybe just fine-tuning some of the stuff. But what that would do for us is it would allow us to further explore and get engineers involved and really come up with the answers we need to get more detail on this. Okay.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Hanson.
It's for the developer again, just to clarify, based upon this recommendation, but you aren't comfortable with the agreement as is. You'd like to change a few things, correct? And then I heard earlier, Andy, I don't know if it was from you, but state law about the secondary water. Did I hear state law mentioned? So what does state law require, that they have to?
If you irrigate your lawn with your culinary water, you're required to have some kind of backflow prevention device on your system so you don't suck the contaminants.
That was the state, but the state law had nothing to do with requiring secondary water.
No, it does not. Just
that's
the backflow prevention.
That's the
issue.
nuance we want to require. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Garden.
So I guess other cities that do not have secondary water, for example, Salt Lake, they do have to do this backflow testing under state law for all of the...
That's our understanding, yes, sir.
And there's an additional cost to that, right? Because somebody has to cost to the city.
Somebody within the city staff has to administer that program.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Adams, did you want to do your follow-up?
The clarifying on the tank is, if I may, so UDOT replacing our, don't they have to give us cost of replacement? Whatever it takes to replace it?
I can't answer that.
Okay, I've been told that's the case, or most likely the case. Where'd that UDOT guy go? Let's put him on the spot. But anyway, if you can't answer that, that's square. So that's fine. But
obviously, that's what we're going to go for.
Yeah. So I mean, if they're going to pay replacement costs, it almost seems moot a little bit to the burden.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Garden.
I know this is not a question, but would it be all right if I made a comment relevant to the order? So the recommendation from staff is to table the item. The developer has asked that we actually move it and negotiate. And my comment is, I don't feel comfortable passing an agreement that is later going to be amended. So in other words, I think the body should move an item that we should not try to, plus we can't even do that at this point. We cannot rewrite it in council meetings, so I would prefer to
table it.
And so I make that motion to table the agreement until the negotiating, the city and the developer can work through to a final agreement for passage.
Anybody want to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion about tabling it?
What caused
Councilmember Adams?
What caused the conflict between the agreement? What?
I can speak to that. We got the developer and their parties an agreement on, I believe it was Friday afternoon. The parties that we sent it to were on vacation. They didn't return until Tuesday. Then when they had an opportunity to look at it, they had some changes, and we got their draft this afternoon at about 3 o'clock. So it's just been a practical timing issue, I guess bad timing.
Councilmember Hanson?
Can I ask a question, even though this is the comment
yes,
period?
I'll allow it.
Yeah, well, how long do you think this would take to iron out before next meeting?
I think, in my opinion, and Andy might speak to this as well, I think we've made significant headway in the last 2 weeks. I think in an additional 2 weeks, we'd be able to come back to council with a determination one way or the other how staff should feel council should proceed.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Councilmember Barber.
A question. So part of this annexation is also including the rezone as well. And so it's not the annexation alone, it's also the rezone, which is also our only, is it this our opportunity to put forth all the items of the development agreement right now?
That's correct. So what's before you this evening is just an annexation agreement.
Okay.
There's not an annexation, there's not a rezone, it's an agreement, and it's an arm's length transaction between the city and the developer. And this is my opinion that this should precede the annexation, because this is when the city has the most discretion to get what it needs out of the developer, for lack of a better term.
If I could further clarify also, we would still need to take further action to have an annexation ordinance that would also establish the zone. So that would be a future council action.
That's why I wonder if we could address the annexation on its own tonight and then these items be addressed in that annexation ordinance.
So the annexation itself isn't on the agenda this evening, and I would encourage you not to annex the property without an annexation agreement. Once the property's annexed, then it's subject to our city ordinance, and any takings and exactions we're subject to.
Okay. All right. So we've got motion, second. Are we ready to vote on this?
Can we repeat the motion?
The motion is to table it.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So I'll start with Councilmember you.
Page.
I'm sorry, it's a bad night. Page, there we go.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion to table passes 4-1. Okay. All right. Next is a resolution approving the acceptance of property from the Sunset Equestrian HOA along the frontage of Pioneer Park abutting Angel Street. Resolution 18-1-5. And Cole is going to present this.
So this is just kind of clearing up some property issues. Here the map kind of shows when the Sunset Equestrian Estates was originally developed, they had horse trails and whatnot. And as far as on the frontage of Angel Street that butts Pioneer Park, when we were going through our engineering and staking it out for the construction, we realized that the Sunset Equestrian Estates still had a parcel that ran across the front. And so this is a quick claim deed from Sunset Equestrian Estates to the city to accept that parcel as part of the park property. It relieves Sunset Equestrian Estates from any liability with the park being that there. So that's kind of the reason for the quick claim with that parcel. It makes the park whole and a continuous city-owned property.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'll now open the public comment section for this. I don't have anybody signed up. If anybody would like to speak to this item, you have 3 minutes. Okay. Seeing none, I'll close the public comment period and go to council questions. Any questions on this item?
There's no cost to this, right? This is just a gift over because they're giving up their trails and be responsibility for that and just give it to us.
That's correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. Great. Okay, thank you. If I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 18-1-5, approving the acceptance of property from the Sunset Equestrian HOA along the frontage of Pioneer Park.
Second the motion.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Garn, seconded by Councilmember Adams. Any discussion? None? Let's start with a vote. Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
And we'll go with you.
Aye.
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 Great. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right. Next is approval of substation technician job description and authorizing for hire. And Gary, are you presenting? No? Are you sure? All right. Who's presenting this? I'm sorry.
I think we addressed this pretty well last time. There is a staff report in there. I hope we answered a few of your questions that you brought up last time as well about some costs. We've included those in the packet. I think we feel like we're ready to move forward with this new position in our city, and of course we've asked Gary to be here to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. All right, I'd like to open the public comment section for this item. I don't have anybody signed up, but if anybody would like to speak to this, they may. Seeing no one, I will close public comment. And council, any questions? No questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Councilmember Page.
Yeah, this is for Andy. I noticed when we talked about this, the recommendation from the Planning Commission, they talked about, they approved it with, they said they voted unanimously to recommend approval of the preliminary plat with the following items to be addressed before the consideration of the final plat.
You're a step ahead of us.
Subtech.
Oh, already? Oh, I thought we already went back to this one. Oh, that's what I had on my next one.
It might have changed.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Order may have changed.
Yeah, sorry
Okay,
about that.
well, we'll hold that comment for a later
Yeah.
date.
But back to the subtech thing. Any questions about that? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the recommendation for the subcheck contract, or job posting, I should say.
Second the motion.
Okay. Moved by Councilmember Barber, seconded by Councilmember Adams. Any discussion?
I have one comment.
Yes.
It's because I asked for a lot of comparables in the past. We were provided with those. Obviously, just like staff said last week or 2 weeks ago, we haven't been using or contracting with a subtech for some time. We've just been relying on other cities. But in looking at the numbers that are projected even from previous years, clear back to 2013, the cost could get quite high to continue to contract with this. That's what I was wondering. I wanted to see the data surrounding this. Obviously, it's not super recent. I wish we had a little bit better to compare to, but I feel like I can definitely support staff's recommendation to invest in this employee, and because of the nature of our power system, and that we have the money allocated to pay for this expense to the city. So thank you.
Thanks. All right. Shall we vote? Let's start with Councilman Adams.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right. Next item is D, request to rezone 4.52 acres of property.
Finally.
You were so anxious. At 849 and 881 South Sunset Drive from A1 light agriculture to R1 LD single-family low-density zoning district with a PRUD, planning residential unit development overlay zone. All right. And thank you.
Yeah, Mayor, if I may recommend, action item E is regarding the same project. We may introduce that at the same time, and we would still look for separate motions, however.
Is that all right? It's fine by me. Very good.
What we have here before you is a request on the east side of Sunset Drive, just right near the Centennial Junior High School. There are two property owners who are interested in developing the eastern portion or back portion of their property. Combined, they have about 4.5 acres. Currently, it's under an agricultural zoning, only allows 1 lot per acre, and based off the other requirements, it's essentially maxed out on what it's allowed to develop under that zoning district. So they've requested, in order to further the development, the R1 LD zone. The low-density zoning district essentially is 2 units per acre. It allows some flexibility in lot size, nothing smaller than 12,000 square feet. However, again, the overall total density, no more than 2. So on this property with nearly 4.5 acres, just over that, they're looking at doing up to 9 potential lots. You can see the preliminary plat proposal here. The R1LD accommodates this. However, the PRUD overlay zone is also necessary to allow for the private street access. So as drawn there, there's a cul-de-sac, which is all a private street, upkept and maintained by the property owners who access off of it. You can see that there's 2 existing homes. So when we say 9 lots, that includes those 2 homes. So there could be 7 new homes built in this area. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this, and there were a couple comments from the public, a few of them technical in nature that will have to be dealt with through the final plat process, assuming this moves forward to that end. But otherwise, recommended unanimously that there be approval of it, and as Councilman Page stated, with a couple stipulations that they had concerns or considerations on. So one was a private lane does not require a sidewalk be with it, but the Planning Commission recommended that there be sidewalk included with it. They said on one or possibly both sides. They were a little bit divided there, but said to the council's discretion they felt that sidewalk would be appropriate along the private drive. And second was to negotiate or discuss fencing with the property owners to the north and south. And so with that, they passed along that recommendation. I'm happy to take any questions from you at this time. And again, we're looking for motions separately on the different items as listed on the agenda. Thank you.
All right. First, we're going to have public comment on this. Let me make sure. Okay. I don't have anybody signed up for public comment. Anybody like to comment on this? You had 3 minutes. Anyone? Okay, I will close the public hearing. Questions from council? Councilmember Garn.
So I did listen to most of the Planning Commission meeting. However, I cannot recall what it seems a little bit odd, so maybe I'll ask this question first. Usually when we've approved a zone or a private lane, we don't usually require fencing or sidewalk on a private lane. So I just wondered what is unique about this situation that we would make that condition.
I'll reapproach here since the public's not coming up. I always get the privilege of trying to speak forward on behalf of the Planning Commission, so bear with me as I go through the meeting. Our ordinance specific to fencing does state within it under a subdivision that if uses, adjacent uses are determined to be incompatible, that fencing could be considered and required. And so in this area, if you go back to the zoning map, Sandy is perhaps the best view of it. There are agricultural properties that are adjacent to it. I think it was the Planning Commission's feeling that it might be enough of a difference of a use with the smaller lots versus the large lot A1 agricultural zone properties. The discussion turned to, I guess there's an existing fence with an irrigation line on it. Wasn't 100% clear on whether they just wanted to make sure that one stayed or wanted a new one, and I don't know if the Planning Commission was totally clear on that either, which is where they left it to talk to the neighbors with each other to figure out what's really desired. I do know one concern of the adjacent neighbor to the north was that they not be responsible to participate in paying for any new fencing. And I do believe there may be some updates on that, as at least I believe I see Ms. Peterson back there. If they might be able to explain it further, so if that's not sufficient. But I believe that was the fencing consideration of the commission. And then to the second point regarding the question of sidewalk, again, not as a requirement, but because of the PRUD aspect where it gives some discretion in whether the development's granting a better subdivision than might otherwise be done through a standard subdivision. The Planning Commission talked about just having safe access on there, and they felt that that might be an element to make this a safe and better back and forth discussion. Again, with the agricultural type area that this is in, whether adding sidewalk took away from that, and if that was more important than having the sidewalk or not. And so there, again, was a difference of opinion from the Planning Commission on whether or not it was necessary and how much, and thus the recommendation's pretty broad, asking the City Council to make sure it meets what you think is necessary.
Thank you. And I guess follow-up question, if the developer is here to answer how, or perhaps you, Lyle, what the developer's position is on providing a fence and sidewalk on the private lane.
I hate to put him on the spot.
Council members, Mayor. So at this point in time, I think I'd like to ask for a waiver on the sidewalk. I don't see why it's needed, where the traffic is going to be pretty low traffic based on just the amount of lots that are in there. So at this point, I'd like to ask for a waiver. As far as the fencing goes, that is kind of news to me. I wasn't aware that the neighbors were wanting to. Wanted a fence and didn't want to have any part in paying for it. So, but as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to ask for a waiver on the sidewalk.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember.
Just a question. So, I couldn't find anywhere in our ordinances where we were requiring a sidewalk on these private lanes. So I don't know, is a waiver actually necessary?
Perhaps it wouldn't technically be a waiver where it's not a requirement. However, it would be the council to determine whether or not you would wish to require it.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Councilmember Adams.
Do we have the liberty to enforce this? I mean, it's not. I feel like it's an undue burden to require this when it's not in our code. I feel it's, again, arbitrary.
under the PRUD overlay, I believe with the broad discretion that's subject in that chapter of the ordinances, I believe there is some ability to ask for items such as that. Perhaps I'll move back to my desk, but what it comes down to is whether or not the council wishes to grant that zone. If you determine that the proposed subdivision meets the definitions, the standards, that it does create a development that enhances the area, the community, and is done in a way that you're allowing some deviation. The private street in itself is a variation from what's typical under a subdivision. However, they're all over the place. They're common, but it just allows you that discretion to give flexibility to the developer on multiple items. You can grant deviances from typical setbacks or other requirements. You could probably also add, or I believe you could add, additional requirements as you feel is appropriate to accomplish the goals of the PRUD. And so I do believe you have that discretion.
Okay, thank you. All right. Do you have a question? Councilmember Page.
The only question I have is the concern I have. I have the same concern that Councilman Adams has. I do know that if you put a sidewalk down here, I guess the question I would have is, would that affect the lot? You can see the lots are, they're narrower depth-wise. They're not as depth. If you put a sidewalk here, is that going to affect what size of home you can put on there? Does that affect the setbacks?
Yeah, typically the way that we plat the private street, if it includes those types of improvements, as shown here, it's a 24-foot right-of-way or private lane. To add probably a sidewalk at back of curb. Typically, you got a 4-foot sidewalk. When you put it up against the back of a curb, you probably add a foot to that, so maybe a 5-foot sidewalk adjacent to that. So you are probably taking out, again, per side. So if you did it on one side, probably 5 feet out of the frontage of those, or the depth of those lots. Similarly, if it was on both sides, you're probably close to 10 feet that's removed from the lot size.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Councilmember Garn.
This is just another point of order, and I apologize for being so technical, but I'm a rule follower.
Okay.
But basically in the
Except for
question...
the one we were lenient on.
That's enough.
In the question section, we should probably not, because I have a comment as well, but I'm waiting for the comment on section 2.
Oh.
So...
Bad.
So-
All right. We're going to be better at this. It started off as a question, right? Okay, thank you. Any legitimate questions at this point? Questions?
James, to you, sorry.
No,
okay.
Councilmember Adams.
The radius, does it meet International Fire Code? Does it meet, which is our fire code? Does the radius of the cul-de-sac meet that?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Hanson, did you have something? No? Okay. All right.
Great. I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
I move that we approve the rezone of 4.52 acres of the property from an A1 light agriculture to an R1D single-family residential zoning district and the preliminary plat, with the exception of to eliminate the requirement of a sidewalk.
Okay. Second.
So we should probably take these in 2 items, one with the rezone and then a second motion for the preliminary plat.
Okay.
True.
Is there a requirement of a sidewalk? Do we really need to eliminate it? There's not a
It's really
requirement,
just a
right?
recommendation.
First, let's have a second before we discuss this.
I will second.
All right. Okay. So the motion is to approve the rezone and to not include the recommendation from Planning Commission for a sidewalk.
I cleaned it up.
All right.
I cleaned it up.
Okay. Any discussion? Jake? Oh, sorry. Councilmember Garn, any discussion?
Yeah, I just, I can appreciate maybe the concern of some of the Planning Commission members in having the conditions. However, I'm not persuaded that this is different than other subdivisions. In fact, to require a fence when there is agricultural property makes me less likely to want to have that as a condition. Certainly if there were animals there, or the residents wanted to keep animals from the agricultural property from their property, then maybe they would want to put in a fence and they would pay to have a fence put in, but to actually require it, I guess I'm just not seeing the conditions why that would be required. Same thing with the private lane. I'm not sure what's different about this private lane than other private lanes, and it seems a little bit arbitrary to require it without a unique reason to do so. So I would be in favor of the motion dropping those conditions as a condition of rezoning the property.
Anybody else feel similarly? Want to amend the motion at all?
Yeah, actually, I'm okay with that. And the reason is I was at the Planning Commission, and there wasn't any neighbors that were concerned about the fence being there. In fact, the concern was, do we have to have a different fence than what I have now? I actually enjoy the fence I have, so I think that would be all right. But when I looked at this, it looked like to me that it was more of a discussion item. That's what it looked like to me on the fence itself to determine. So I'm not sure if that needs to be eliminated or.
So I'm sorry, Mayor, just a point of clarification. Has Councilmember Garn moved to amend Councilmember Page's motion?
He did not. He did not move to amend. He mentioned that he would like to eliminate that requirement, but he did not motion it.
Oh, and I apologize for that. I guess the best way to do it would be to ask the motion maker a friendly amendment.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Can I make a comment? I would suggest that fencing is probably more of a preliminary plat item and could be included in the next motion rather than amending this one. This is just simply the rezone.
All right.
Okay.
Makes sense. All right. Thank you. So the motion is to rezone 4.52 acres of property from light agricultural to single-family residential.
Okay.
That is all. All right?
Does he need to amend it?
No, I don't think so. No, we're good. We're good, right?
Does any council member object to how Mayor Witt characterized the motion? Seeing no objection, I think you're fine.
Okay. All right. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All right. Let's start with Councilmember Adams, or did we start with you already?
Doesn't matter.
Let's start with you again.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes 5-0, and let's talk about the preliminary plat. Anybody want to make a motion on that? If I might be so bold.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'll move that we approve the preliminary plat. I can get back here for the property in question, with the conditions that we eliminate the fencing requirement and also the sidewalk requirement.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Moved by Councilmember Page, seconded by Councilmember Hanson. Any further discussion? Councilmember Adams?
I would just offer a friendly amendment that would leave the fencing in the hands of the developer and the surrounding property owners. I believe that is what the flexibility in the code is, as stated by our zoning administrator tonight. I watched the meeting also, and it did seem like there was a concern over fencing. It didn't seem the developer had too much angst over that point. I think we can leave it in the hands of the people. So if we completely remove it now, we might make those neighboring residents feel like we just stripped them of what our code does leave up to us to have a little bit of leeway.
Okay.
So what would be the best way to do that? Hey, I'm okay with them talking and communicating.
I would just make a friendly motion or amendment to your motion that the fencing element be left up to the developer and the surrounding property owners.
Yeah.
Well, the way that was phrased as the second, I don't think I would object to it. But
I should say Councilmember Garn.
I think I would argue that leaving it in the hands of the developer and the residents around there would mean that you take the condition out. But so it's a little bit redundant, but I don't object to the friendly amendment because basically we're saying it's not a condition, right? We're not saying it's a requirement. We're just saying we're leaving it in there that they're discussing it. So while I don't think it needs to be there, I don't necessarily object to it being there.
Okay, so what are we doing? It's just, I got lost.
So the exact motion to the exact wording to the friendly amendment was that we leave it in there because it's more of a discussion point than a requirement. Fencing discussed with property owners on the north and the south to determine what is appropriate. So I suppose we're saying that it has to be discussed. Probably would be anyway, but.
Okay, Nick.
So I think at this point, Councilmember Page has accepted the amendment, and it's just left to you, Councilmember Garn, to determine if that amendment, if you will still second that motion with the amendment.
Yes, because I don't think this is a requirement that any particular fencing is put in. So.
Okay. All right. Are we ready to vote then? All right. Let's go with Councilmember Hanson.
Aye.
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 Great. Motion passes 5-0. Okay. Next is a resolution declaring the necessity for and authorizing use of the right of eminent domain for acquisition of real property easement for Kaysville City purposes, Resolution 18-1-2. I'm having a horrible night. Shane.
Mayor, City Council, the resolution before you is another step in the process that we started back in November to condemn a temporary construction easement along Angel Street for the purpose of piping a ditch, filling in that ditch, and installing curb, gutter, and sidewalk. Once this resolution is passed, we have to wait 30 days from the date the notice was mailed, and after that point we can officially file a condemnation order with the court. And as presented before, we're hoping this condemnation process does two things. Number one, we hope that it gives the residents some peace of mind that a neutral third party will come up with a suitable compensation number that they feel comfortable with. And also number two is being able to condemn in this way we would also petition the court for immediate occupancy, which would allow us to get this project done and out of their hair as soon as we possibly could. So that's the gist of it. Obviously, we're available here to answer any questions about this resolution.
Okay, very well. Thanks. All right, we do have some residents who are wanting to speak in the public comment section. First, we'll have Marianne Boyack, followed by Carrie Boyack. And you have 3 minutes, and I don't allow any time after 3 minutes, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank Michelle Barber for reaching out to hear us. The phone call was much appreciated. Thank you. First one in a whole year. And it's about time there's a council meeting on this project. It's a shame the only reason is it's because it's a formality before you do condemnation on us. From our first notification on this project, we were treated with aggression, threats. We were and still are told one thing and then another is done. Dealing with Mr. Shane Scott, we lost all trust and faith in our city. We have creek frontage property on Angel Street with natural sound barrier and extreme privacy. That's valuable. We know we had to pay a price for it. So when we're continually being told there's no value loss on removing it, it's frustrating to say the least. The morning we were woken to trees slamming across highway and mass destruction with no agreement or permission to do so, the only thing that stopped them was calling the news. Yet Mr. Scott tells me, how dare you? Well, I have no problem doing it again if need be. I believe Mr. Butters when he continually insists he had the go-ahead that morning to do what he did, just by how fast and reckless he was taking the trees down. I guess slide in, get it done, ask for forgiveness instead of permission didn't quite work out for you. We continually get the brunt of Mr. Scott's frustration over this project. Well, it boils down to one thing. Do your job properly from the beginning. If this had occurred, we all wouldn't be here this evening. With, again, all of us paying the price for his mistakes. When will he be held accountable? The city is not above laws and proper procedures in the state of Utah. It's astounding you continually think you are. We are still entitled to second appraisal on our property. You cannot say an appraisal on someone else's property counts as one on mine. And if need be, we will definitely request our second one. You are done telling us something we have worked so hard to acquire holds no value. If you want to continue, you will pay for that value you are removing. You can only continue to push people so much before they stand firm and say enough. I hope Mr. Butters uses a different technique than the Wreck-It Ralph technique when he approaches my property, because anything he touches or damages outside the shaded area, you will compensate me for. If I sound too demanding or harsh, please consider the position you have put me in with this hanging over our heads for over a year, with extreme stress, as well as a tree being knocked down 2 feet away from me, and then me being told, well, you didn't own that one. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Carrie Boyack, followed by Caleb Stroh.
How are you? There's a gray area on where exactly they're going to be tearing. They sent us a map with a gray area on it. But when I talked to the contractor that's going to do it, then his estimates are a lot farther up than what I'm getting from the city. So we've asked several times, let's come out and spike it. Let's know exactly where, because the condensation is going to have an amount on it. So we don't want you going past that. Also, we talked about there is springs in that creek. We're supposed to get a geological survey on it and get back with us. That never happened. So when they're piping it, we want to make sure the groundwater doesn't just come up. All of a sudden we have all this groundwater, all the work you've done. 6 months later, you have sidewalks in a creek or a sinkhole because it wasn't done properly. The Corps of Engineers gave them a pass to do it, and they have to go by those guidelines and abide it. So the big thing is we want to know exactly how far they're coming. We want to know what they're doing. We have a right to know exactly why they're doing it. We've had safety of the kids, a sidewalk. We got to widen the street. We got to pipe the creek because of settlement going in down the stream. So what is it? Is it one thing? It's another thing. That's why you can see how confused we are. So our main concern is it going to be piped right, done right. And number two, is it going to be done where we don't have the water drainage under our property because our property sits 4 to 5 feet under the street. So where's that water going to go? And threats like, you don't like this, we'll do plan B, you'll just have a big drop off on your side of the sidewalk. That's real safe for the kids, isn't it? So you can see what we're frustrated and what we've been going through. So we want this resolved just like everybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Caleb Stroh, followed by Greg Frank.
Bring his papers back to him in a second. My name is Caleb Stroh, and I am a resident of Kaysville City, and I am directly affected by this agenda item. While I would ultimately like to see this project come to fruition, starting the condemnation process is inappropriate at this time. The city did not fulfill its legal obligations to all residents. While we applaud you for beginning anew this process, it does not change the fact that Kaysville City illegally started work without due process on 3 of these properties. Legally termed, this is inverse condemnation, a serious crime which Kaysville City has perpetrated on its residents. Starting condemnation proceedings will not automatically absolve Kaysville City or you, the City Council, from a lengthy legal battle, media scrutiny, and a costly settlement. If anything, it will ensure that the fine, tax-paying citizens of Kaysville City will pay a hefty price for your mistake. For instance, this project has many engineering pitfalls that weren't addressed because there was no planning commission meeting for this project. Issues such as sidewalk settlement and drainage problems should have been addressed and up for public comment. We have also had our property just today surveyed by a state licensed engineer, and they found that the actual property affected by this taking is over 1,000 square feet more than we've been told by Kaysville City. These are serious legal issues that need to be addressed and probably should have been addressed had this gone through the proper public process. You are hereby notified that, if started, we will be watching this project carefully. The affected area will be under video surveillance during the entire construction process. We will be making sure Kaysville City fulfills its contractual agreements by stopping water flow to the creek and removing all substrate placed therein during construction activities as required by law. Required fill and compaction of construction materials will be monitored. In accordance with Kaysville City's best management practices, we also believe overhead power should be removed during this project and placed in ground. That has not been clear because there hasn't been a planning commission process to even address these issues. Proper drainage should also be installed, and all appropriate seeps or stormwater issues will be carefully monitored. Any ground settlement or water issues directly or indirectly caused by this project will be under intensive legal scrutiny, and contended issues will be pursued to the fullest extent of the law. Water issues are serious, serious issues. We also contest that Kaysville City officials have followed best management practices and their legal requirements and offered residents no effective or reasonable resolve regarding this project. We believe our private property rights have been infringed upon.
Okay, thank you so much.
For your
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Greg Frank. How about Gregory Carlisle?
Okay, so I got to be quick. 10 months ago, there was trespass and damages on our property done because the city did not follow basic any kind of permission. That was 10 months ago. We've been with the property rights state-run ombudsman's office. We've had a mediator from that office sit there and tell the city staff that you're responsible to cure the property and match the current landscape, which alone puts it over the dollar amount where you have to have an appraisal for that property, period, by law. 2, we sat there and looked at the staff and said, hey, you have to have compensation for the per square footage for the retaining wall. The retaining wall is no longer in the picture because all the mature trees are ripped out of our property. We're on our property. But for the fill of 5,000 square feet, you have to, for a temporary construction easement, have that compensated for. Severance damages, the intrinsic value of the property, when a portion of the property is taken and severance is awarded to the remainder value of the property, that has to be addressed. And then the city staff sat there and looked at it and said, that's not how we do things here. We said, no, that's the Budmanson's brochure says what you need to do. The state-run mediator lawyer saying you need to do this. Oh, that's not how it. So when you go eminent domain, and it looks like inevitably you're going to go eminent domain, we have the right to a jury trial. Now, a jury trial would love this, just for the fact that these items are not addressed. These basic Budmanson private property issues won't be addressed, but which they have to be addressed legally. But also, someone almost died in a Traco in front of our home. It hit the news. It'll hit the news again. And a year later, the city won't attain to basic bullet points of the Budmanson's brochure, etc., so forth, if need be. So, we can all come to an agreement. You guys, you're doing your best. You're doing the best you can do. I would imagine either inept or corrupt practices happened, obviously, but we're assuming people are doing their best. And all agreements that are made need to be made in writing, legal, and signed, period, of course, because I'm saying that out loud just because for the minutes, etc. And I can quote, I'd love to sit here and read the Budmanson's brochure on that. Private property rights whenever a municipality is trying to take over, but I think you have a few general ideas. So there's even things like Admiral Beverage Made Whole, I think is how it's talked about, a new law. So any mature trees are ripped out have to be compensated for, and it goes on. But yeah, there has not even been one legitimate, per law, appraisal. An appraisal was we had by Mr. Lang, but it was taken off by the city staff because they didn't like the appraisal that happened 2 lots to the north of us, because that appraisal actually addressed items in the Budmanson's brochure. Like, oh crap, these guys are right. We got to stop immediately. And so they took that appraisal off. That's another thing the media would love, let alone a jury trial. And then sure enough, it was put back on after I had the mayor and city council people over to my home.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. All right. And Greg Frank? Nope. All right. Anybody else? Please come forward.
Is this my 3 minutes?
Run fast.
We won't count that.
My name's Brett Bass. I'm one of the neighbors. A lot's been said to all of you. I think what I would say is I would encourage you to do the homework on this item. Be sure that you understand the legal issues and everything that goes with it. I know your staff is competent and you get to spend time with them to learn and understand what the project is. But I would encourage you to look at it from the other side and do the research before you vote on anything. The concerns that have been shared, this is just an example of the type of concern. We get a letter from King & King, your legal, and all it talks about is the temporary construction easement. What about the loss of access to water? I'm zoned agricultural. I have animals. What about liabilities? You mentioned earlier you don't know why you need a fence between non-agricultural and agricultural. The first little kid that sticks his arm through there or gets hung on your barbed wire, you're increasing liability. And that's what you're going to do to me with kids walking back and forth, going to school. Right now I have a barrier. I have a big creek and I have trees, and when all that's gone and it's just level ground and I want to put my animals out front, that's an accident waiting to happen. We've already dealt with that with the Tyler Estates development. We were fortunate that the city agreed to require the developer to put in a 6-foot solid fence. So there are lots of issues that I would just encourage all of you to really look at yourself. And that's what I have to say. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to close the public comment period. And now, questions from council. Councilmember Garn.
Tough to know where to start, but maybe I could just start with a general. A lot of comments have been made and assertions made, and I guess I'd like to hear from city staff rather than try to pinpoint all those questions. Just if you've been taking notes, kind of what's your impression of where we are now and some of the issues that have been raised.
I'm not sure how to answer that question without going through the entire process from the start, or I mean.
Let me specify a little bit more.
Yeah,
then.
Thank you.
So, first of all, just a distinction when the developer that had been assigned to this project, when they started work, did they have approval from the city to do that work? Did they have the go-ahead?
I do not believe they did.
Okay.
What was the question again? Do you mind?
I'll allow you
go
to
ahead.
recognize.
Councilmember Adams.
What was his question again? I'm sorry.
So my question was, did the developer go ahead without city approval, basically, on this project?
And that was a no? The answer.
His question was, did he have city approval to go ahead with the work? And the answer was no.
Okay, and then also the water issues that have been raised. As I understand it, there's to be some sort of culvert, so the ditch goes away, is filled in, then it's level ground. What kind of process do you go through to make sure that that's done to code standard?
We had engineers evaluate those concerns that the residents raised about springs and other underground water. And not only did we feel like the engineers mitigated for those things, but we also offered the residents the opportunity to absolve them of any future settling or anything like that might occur as a result of this project.
Okay, and in the condemnation process that's before us today, do some of the issues that were raised as far as any damage done to property and as part of the valuation, or are those considered, for example, the trees that were taken out?
I think that's one of the real challenges with this project is recognizing that there is a loss to the residents. We've acknowledged that on many, many occasions. I'm not capable of saying that your loss is valued at a certain dollar amount. That's not what I do. We involved several different people to help us do that. They didn't come back with satisfactory answers to the residents. And we felt like a judge and jury would be able to in a satisfactory manner come back with some real numbers that the residents can be assured that are from a neutral third party and not just from city staff offerings.
Okay, and this issue's been around for about a year now. Why has it taken so long to get the second appraisal, and who is responsible for that second appraisal?
Well, Mr. Carlisle has his opinion about the timing of the second appraisal. I believe that once we received an appraisal back on one of the homes, we contacted the ombudsman and said, we're going to meet with our city council next week. We'd suggest that you hold off on the other two appraisals until we decide if we're going to continue with this project, which is one of the options on the table, is to just abandon the project. The appraisal that did come back came back significantly higher than we had budgeted at the time. So we were at the point where we could say, do we want to pay this amount to the resident? Do we want to abandon the project, or do we want to do something else? And so we addressed that with you as a city council. And at the time, we felt like condemnation was a good answer to that. Again, maybe we can come to some kind of an agreement with condemnation where we're maybe between $0 and the cost of the appraisal, whatever that came out at. But again, we also have continuously been open to future negotiations, but we do remain pretty far apart with most of the residents. The ones on the southern two end also have legitimate concerns about the damage that was done to their property up to this point. Those I think could be addressed in the condemnation process as well. That's what I've been told. So we feel like that the condemnation would answer all those questions and give the residents that peace of mind about someone besides the city telling them what they deserve.
Thank you. And then the last question I have is the discrepancies between the assertions been made that the city is not following the ombudsman's recommendations.
I'm not sure how to address that. We've been in contact with Mr. Colomar from the Ombudsman's office several times. He knows about this process. We've talked about it with him in the room during mediation with several of the residents, and brought that up as a possible solution. I don't want to speak for him. I feel like he came out with some positive thoughts on what condemnation can do for someone. It should be a very fair process. It should be the fairest of processes. I don't have any fear of it, because the one fact that I keep reminding the council of as we talk about condemnation is that we need to be prepared to pay whatever the judge tells us to pay. That is the downside to condemnation from the city's perspective. If he says pay everybody $100,000 each, we will need to come up with that money to pay them that. But we do feel like we trust the process, and we feel like that will be a fair process to both the city and the residents. And at this point, I don't see another alternative, although I remain open to any kind of negotiation that the residents or anyone else would like to partake in.
Thank you. Mayor?
Okay. Any other questions?
I have another question.
Councilmember Barber.
This is for staff. So with our recommendation that we basically bring in this third party and they're responsible for evaluations and appraisals and determining all of the prices, the city's basically removed from this process going forward.
Do you know, Nick, better how that, I mean, condemnation is not something I've ever seen all the way through. I believe that's the case. We have to present some of the previous appraisals that we've received and done, and what we would submit all those as evidence. But I think at the end of the day, the jury or the court proceeding would also come in and evaluate that on their own as well.
Okay, that's one of the points that I wanted to make sure, because it sounds like a second appraisal, whatever happened with it, would be warranted at this point.
Yeah, there is still some ongoing second appraisals that are happening, at least 2 that I'm aware of. We've been waiting for those and continue to wait for those, and we're interested in that information as well, and that certainly will become part of the record.
No shouting out.
So if we vote to go forward with this, and we basically remove the city and engage this third-party jury, what is our commitment now?
So basically what the state law requires is before we can start an eminent domain action, a lawsuit involving eminent domain condemnation, we have to have the approval of the city council in a public hearing.
Okay.
So what's on the agenda this evening is you would be authorizing the city to file the lawsuit to begin an eminent domain lawsuit. And that's basically 2 parts. Part 1 is the city would have to show that the property that we wanted to use was for a public purpose, public use, and then second, it would then move to compensation, damages.
Okay.
And I should say that by authorizing this, that doesn't mean that negotiations stop. That just authorizes this. I mean, we could come to some kind of resolution, and I believe city staff is open to that. We could come to some kind of settlement agreement resolution on this and not file an action if possible.
Councilmember Hanson.
Just a point of clarification, but if we go down this road of condemnation, you said we are obligated. There is no saying no. If it comes out so expensive, we want to scrap the project, that's no longer an option. Is that just from what I heard?
That's how I understand it. I think maybe even we could scrap the project, but we may still need to have the ability to do the project, and we'd still need to pay the residents, is from what I'm understanding.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, just
Councilmember Page.
No, thank you. You got it. Hey, just a question. Are we? I mean, if we start this proceeding, what's the ditch project? I mean, are we going to go forward with it and finish it? Or, I mean, isn't that the purpose of doing something like this?
That is, from the staff perspective, the one of the 2 major positive benefits of the condemnation process is, number 1, hopefully the residents feel like they got a fair assessment of their property value. But number 2 is we can file the condemnation action and request immediate occupancy. So we could start this project as soon as the court allows us to, which could be a matter of weeks, which I feel like even those that are most frustrated with this project would still like to see those barrels and that stuff gone.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right. Councilmember Adams.
I don't know how much the 2 new council members, maybe over the last year, have watched council and maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But so when we were told, I got a question. When we were told in November of 2016 in this very room, when this council member asked, are all the residents on board with this? And I was answered by you, Shane, that they are. What were they on board with? We can go to the minutes.
We could, and I've clarified my comments there several times with you. I don't know
it's
exactly.
Never been clear.
Well, if you have the record, I'm happy to address it. But I
have emails asking you the same thing too for months. Yeah. I was always told that they're happy.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they're ever happy. I think I've always made it clear that I think the residents would prefer that we didn't do this project at all. I feel like I've made that abundantly clear every time I've spoken about this project. But I think we were on the road to negotiating this work when the work that was done in the ditch by the contractor, I believe that did set us back some in the perception of the residents. Obviously, you can see for yourself they aren't happy with me in any way, shape, or form right now. So they're entitled to their opinion, and I would be happy to address any of their concerns or any of the history of this project now or in any future meeting.
Well, to clarify, in the hierarchy of things, we work for them. You work for us, so they're not happy with us either. You're our representative too, and they're our bosses. Okay? So the question is, as a former contractor of this nature, showing up with two 60, 70,000 pound excavators, crawling them into a ditch, we absolutely have no permission that we gave. Not a text, not a wink, not a nod, nothing was given to the contractor. As a former contractor of that nature, I find that extremely hard to believe. And I always have. You know that this has always been my stance.
I'm not sure if it's the best thing for us to debate the
It's a viable question.
I think if we want to move into a closed session, I'd be happy to discuss exactly what I believe has happened. I think I've been open about that in the past. I don't want to disparage another organization or another person in an open meeting, but I'd be happy if you feel like that's something you want to discuss. If we want to move into a closed session, I'd be happy to discuss it.
If I might interject, I don't think this line of questioning is going to help us decide what to do at this point. So let's focus on, it's time to make a motion, so somebody needs to make a motion.
There was one more question.
Is it a real question?
It is.
All
Where
right.
is the contractor in all this? We heard it stated tonight from staff.
I don't think this is a real question.
Could we ask the people then? I mean,
no,
at
we
what
can't.
point-
No, this does not further our debate. So let's focus.
Mayor, if I may, it's important. But we've been told
It's
tonight
interesting.
that it's his fault that he moved forward. So
No,
we're in this predicament.
It's done. What's done is done, okay? We're not going to change that. What we are talking about now is what we want to do right here. And who the contractor is or what happened actually is immaterial at this point, okay?
Could I ask you a question as their representative, as the people's chief?
Nope, you can't. What we're doing is we're talking about this item.
So if
I want a motion.
it's a third party who got us into this, you don't care.
Nope, not at this point. Let's
That's
have
all
a
I
motion.
ask.
No, sorry.
So
Councilmember Garn.
I will move to adopt the resolution as proposed.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Councilmember Garn and seconded by Councilmember Page. Discussion. And I'll bring out my timer as necessary. Okay. Any discussion? Are we ready to vote?
If the floor is open, I'd like to ask again, now that we're in open discussion, where is the contractor in all this?
And I don't think this is...
Why?
This is not pertinent to the discussion, really. It's really interesting. It's really interesting, but it doesn't change this council's decision.
I'm hopeful that a lot of those issues can be worked out through the jury process. So if there is some if there's some damage there that needs to be paid, that can be also addressed through this process. I don't know that that's how it works, but I'm hopeful that that's how it works.
Okay.
Okay, I'll respect what your opinions are.
Okay.
I have an extremely difficult time with imposing such atrocity on the residents and the people of our city. And this is not the first time that a group of residents have gone through such things of this nature.
Okay. Are we ready to vote?
I thought it was discussion.
No.
I think there's more discussion.
More discussion. Yeah. All right. Councilmember Barber.
This is, even though I'm new to this project, I've obviously taken the time to try and educate myself as much as I can on this. And every resident I talked to, I said, I wish I had a magic wand to go in and make this and make better the past that has happened. Obviously, I don't have that. I only have before me the actions that we have to take forward. And I think we are representing our residents when we say, well, with bringing in this third party, with taking the city out of it, because obviously there's been lots of questions on value and process. If taking the city out of it can move this project forward with the best representation out of the city's hands and employed by a judge and a jury. And that's why I'm asking these questions of, what can we ensure that they will have represented if we pass this motion that's in front of us right now. I think hopefully, no matter the outcome today, we can still continue to work with the residents of the city and make sure the best resolution comes. I think I've heard that from every single resident and from staff, that there's got to be a way that we can mitigate these issues that are going to continually come up. Even if the construction is done one time, the property owners are still left with this change to their property, change to the environment that they have. And hopefully we can word this, and this is where the jury hopefully will help us, word it in such a way that we can continue to protect their rights for unforeseen consequences from this action. So I have heard the residents. I will continue to hear them. I hope they know that.
Councilmember Garn.
Well, this is definitely a thorny issue, and I have to say, I'll just start out with one sort of homey comment, and that is that, I've lived in Kaysville with my wife now for, 32 years, I guess, and we always used to, before the trail, we would always ride down Angel Street, and the very prettiest place on our entire ride is right where you guys' house are, because the trees were just beautiful there, and it was really nice to go down that lane. Having said that, some of the reasons stated, I think one of the questions that was asked by one of the residents is, which reason is it for doing this project? And it's actually all of those reasons. It's the water issues, it's the silt going in, it's being able to put the sidewalk in, because now the city is so much different than it was 30 years ago, and there's kids that do walk to school on that route. So it's all of those reasons that the project needs to go forward. And that's one of the main reasons where there's an impasse. And again, I'm certainly not an expert either to know what the exact amount would be, but to compensate for any damage to the property. But I do think that at this point, further delay benefits no one, doesn't benefit the students, the city, the people who live around the pond, the residents who live there. And that this process, I believe, is the best option we have at this point to move for condemnation and then introduce a fair process with a conclusion, because otherwise we may never reach the conclusion. And that's my comment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Page.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think that we've just got to the point where we're going to have to agree to disagree on this, and I think this has been a terrible thing for not only all the people who live in that area, and I would absolutely hate not having that finished or something happen. But I think at this point the best procedure is to let's get it done, and then we'll have to work out the compensation. And I just think that at this point that's where it's at. I think it's a safety hazard not only for the citizens that live there, but it's for all the people that's on that street and the kids that have to walk to school and everything else. And so at this point, I think that this is probably the best way.
Okay. Anything?
I have a question. Can I still ask a question?
Sure.
So one of the points that was brought up was about things like proper drainage, overhead power being moved, other kind of seems like amenities to this project. And I don't foresee those really being taken into account by this jury and this third party that's coming in, because they'll probably just address the property project at hand. So where would those items fall?
How to do the project has been set aside by an engineer, so we've contracted with an engineer to address all those issues. I couldn't say at this point power is going to go here, but there are plans that we're happy to provide to you and have provided to the residents that show all these different items. Now, I look at plans and I can't tell you what they mean or anything, but again, we've made ourselves available to residents, and we're happy to sit down any number of times and go through the plans and answer each and every question if they'd like to. We've done that on several occasions and would continue to do that as well.
So where would the negotiations in those plans come? Would it be during this process when it goes to a jury, or would it be outside of it?
So negotiating on, like, if the power should go
drainage,
above, or
yeah.
I think we'd probably like to hear from them about that now. We've entered in negotiations on several different facets of how to do the project, how driveways would look and change. Power overhead or underground, I don't know if we're going to change our minds on that, but we're open to those discussions immediately.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. Are you ready to vote? Yes. Okay. Let's start with Councilmember Hanson.
Aye.
Nay. I'm going to vote against our own.
Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. All right. Now we're moving on to G, amendment of section 1724.3, yard and structure regulations of chapter 24/7 farm animals, etc.
Try to give you the longest titles, Mayor, so you can read these agenda items. Appreciate you giving us a minute to discuss these items. The Planning Commission has, for several years, been getting many applications for small farm animals. Kaysville City allows pretty much everywhere in town to have small farm animals such as chickens on lots that are at least 8,000 square feet in size or larger. And so for almost every Planning Commission agenda, we have one of those on the agenda that a house is requesting that use. Some areas of town, it's a use by right where they don't require Planning Commission approval. Other areas, they have to go before that meeting to consider different conditions or impacts and whether or not there's a unique condition that needs to go with that. And dealing with approximately about 20 of these or so every year, it's become kind of a rubber stamp item where either there are no conditions or it's the same condition every time, that of having some sort of enclosure to contain those. So the discussion of the Planning Commission was they would still like to see farm animals as we do now in some of the areas where there are smaller lots and things when they're large animals, horses, cows, goats, etc. But because chickens have become so commonplace and sort of the known, again, condition has repeated itself time and again, this ordinance essentially takes that stated condition, puts it as a requirement on everybody, and then takes it out of the conditional use process and would allow those uses to go in as a permitted use under the zone designations that you see here. The Planning Commission reviewed this and voted unanimously in favor of recommending the ordinance as proposed to the City Council. And again, I'd be happy to field any questions you may have.
Thank you much. All right, let's open the public comment period for this. Strangely, I don't think there's anybody signed up for this. Nope, nobody signed up to speak for the chickens. Who speaks for the chickens? Nobody here. If they're victims, I know somebody who would. But since there are nobody to speak for the chickens, I will close the public comment and ask for any questions on this.
Just one question. So basically, Lyle, what this does is it takes that decision away from the Planning Commission and just gives it basically to the administration.
That's accurate.
What you should recognize, though, is that this is taking it from a conditional use to a permitted use. And a conditional use in the code is presumed as long as you can mitigate the reasonably foreseeable adverse conditions of the use, in this case the chickens being on the property. If you can reasonably foresee that and you can mitigate it, then you should approve that land use decision. And I think where these are really helpful is when you have something new, like if suddenly you're putting chickens in residential neighborhoods, you might need some time to figure out what the downsides are and kind of figure those out. I think this is a natural progression for a lot of uses, that they go conditional, and then once staff and the city has kind of figured out where the conditions should lie, then they become permitted uses.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Garn.
Yeah, just a preface to my question, after serving for several years on the Planning Commission, the chicken question would come up a lot, but I'm looking in the ordinance, and maybe I missed it, but where it said, and the same question comes up, but then I didn't see that same question was always, well, there was other questions like, do you have, or is it fenced in, is that appropriate? But the one question is, do you have roosters in the residential zone? So how will roosters be treated in the new ordinance then?
Yeah, the Title 17 already has a provision in there that does not allow roosters in these districts, and that's already an outright blanket requirement that they're not permitted. And so that, similar to this process, previously was not listed as a requirement. And over time, it was determined that they continually restricted the roosters in those areas. It became, again, a requirement similar to these enclosures proposed under this ordinance. And so that will continue to remain. The roosters would not be allowed in these locations.
So in other words, all that time that we were asking that question, it was an erroneous question because it's already in code to be enforced. So that. Thank you.
Actually, because you kept asking that question, we previously changed the ordinance and made that a set standard so we didn't have to ask it every time.
Thank you. Now I don't feel quite so dumb.
We like efficiencies.
All right. Okay, any further questions? I'll entertain a motion.
A motion that we approve agenda action item H in its entirety.
Second, anyone?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Adams, seconded by Councilmember Barber.
And Mayor Witt, just a point of clarification on the public's agenda this evening, there is no H. One of the items was removed, so it's G.
G.
Again, I'm working on the
I apologize, Councilmember.
Yes, very good.
So it's
So
G.
sorry.
Okay, I'll correct my motion. I motion that we approve action item G in its entirety.
Still second. All right, very good. Any comments, discussion? Very well.
Go chickens.
Go
sorry,
chickens.
Mayor.
I knew somebody would speak for the chickens. All right, let's go.
You're going to get hate mail.
Yes.
I just can't resist one comment. I saw in the news several times that this is a really big deal in Layton, apparently. And I'm just surprised. It's apparently Kaysville people must
like chickens.
Really, we're united when it comes to chickens.
Chickens united. That's us. All right, very well. Okay, let's vote. Let's start with Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
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 All right, unanimous. Motion passes 5-0. All right. Let's see. We are now going to move into our work items, but first we're going to take a 10-minute break. Per me. Thanks.
I second that.
Much needed.